Hi, welcome back. So now we'll proceed to build the CCBPM. So how do we define a CCBPM? We right click, we say new, we go into process integration scenario objects, select integration process, and let's give it a name, IP file RFC file underscore multi request underscore 00. All right. So go into new process integration and scenario objects integration process IP file RFC file multiple underscore 00. All right. Let's go ahead create. I'll pop it out. I'll close this header here. So and close the processing log here. So that it's a little more conducive. All right. First save this. Okay, now let's go ahead and first start defining the container object, right? There are three container objects that we will be using. File request is the first container object because you're going to get the file out here. Let's call that file request, SIAA file request. All right. Next, I'm going to call it file intermediate. And I'm going to call it as abstract file intermediate multi-line, sorry. I'm going to call it file intermediate multi because this is going to be a multiple messages are going to be here. I'm going to select this SIAA file intermediate and make sure you select the multi-line out here. Okay, make sure you select multi-line. Then we'll say file intermediate. I'll say call it the current line for our for if loop processing. Okay, let's see if I can drag him. Okay, when you're doing the recording, there at times is a problem. So if I've called it file intermediate underscore current. All right, and again the abstract service interface will be the same. Just remember for the file intermediate multi, the multi-line element was selected here, and then the final thing is going to be file response. Okay, it's going to be abstract interface. And I'm going to call it SIAA file response. All right. With that, we are kind of done. All right. Now, before we do this, did we define the mappings? We did not. That's something that I'd forgotten. My bad. So we will come back to the integration process. For now, in the integration process, what we've done, we've defined the integration process with 4 container element. File intermediate multi-line, which is having the multi-line, file intermediate current line, the file request and the file response. So let's go ahead and define our message mapping. So there are 2 mappings that we will be defining. The first mapping is going to be the mapping that is going to be splitting the file request to an intermediate to the intermediate structure that is going to get split. Okay, so the file request is now going to get mapped to the intermediate structure. So my message type here is going to be the request structure and the response structure is going to be the intermediate structure. All right, before we do anything, go into the signature tab and in the target message change the occurrence of 0 to unbounded because I'm going to split this request into n messages, right? So go to the target structure and change it to 0 to unbounded. And after you do that, now what you're going to do for each users, map the users to the intermediate structure. So this users is mapped to this, the users is mapped to the file intermediate and then map your user ID to the user ID. So what's going to happen for each user in this file, you will have as many target messages that are getting created. All right. Next, let's create the other message mapping, which is all right. This is okay. File intermediate request underscore to underscore BAPI underscore request. All right. Let's create that. So this is my message type and this is my BAPI request. So I'm going to go into my imported object RFP, BAPI user get detail and drag it and say okay. And I'm going to map my user ID to the username. All right. That's done. Next mapping is going to be the same thing that we did in the first exercise in the previous sessions. This is going to be the BAPI response to the file response. Okay. So my source message is going to be BAPI user get details response and the target structure is going to be the file response. And let's drag and map the 4 fields. First name goes to first name, last name goes to last name, personal number goes to personal number, person number goes to person number, middle name goes to middle name. Alright, first name, last name, personal number, PRSNO number, and middle name. Alright, and save your message mapping. Now let's go ahead and create our operation mapping. I go into operation mapping. My first operation mapping is going to be OM file request underscore to underscore intermediate split, right? The message mapping where we are splitting the messages. Alright, now I'm going to go to my service interface and say my service interface file request SIAA file request and SIAA file intermediate. Alright, make sure that the target occurrence is 0 to unbounded here. Say read operations, and now you can drag your message mapping here. Alright, file request to intermediate split. With that, your mapping is also the first operation mapping is done. Now let's go ahead and create the second operation mapping. Okay, so our operation mapping has been defined. So now let's go ahead and create the next operation mapping. This is the new this operation mapping is in line with what we did previously. Again, an issue with my right click. Okay, let me close all. And now this, hopefully, it's kind of weird what happens. So I'll click on the create object button. I'll select operation mapping. I'll say OM underscore file, OM underscore file intermediate. It's going to be OM underscore BPM underscore to underscore BAPI, right? We are just going to make a call from BPM to the BAPI. So the outbound structure is going to be my SIAS BAPI structure, perfect. My inbound structure is going to be by MAPI user get detail. I'll say read operations, and then this is my request message mapping. I select that. In my response tab, I select my response message mapping, and I save my mapping. Alright, sorry about the fact that we missed creating the mappings. I'll activate my changes, but make sure you don't select your CCBPM or activate the other mappings. So then we are starting looking at the CCBPM again. Alright, perfect. Now let's get started with the CCBPM, right? In the CCBPM, remember what we've done so far. We had defined 3 container element. Okay, looks like I hadn't saved it. Okay, that's strange, but alright, so this is my CCBPM. Looks like my changes were not saved. So I'm going to go ahead and create the 3 container element. The file request container element, let's do that. File underscore request, and the type is abstract interface, and this is going to be abstract interface. Next, the file response. This is again going to be the abstract interface, and here I'll say select SIAA file response. Make sure you look at the namespace as well, and the namespace is a valid one. Next, we'll say file intermediate underscore multi-line, because this is going to be our multi-line element. Here I'm going to say the file intermediate multi-line. Okay, make sure we select the multi-line element here. Alright, let's save. Okay, and then file intermediate, let's call it the current line element, CURR. You'll see why I'm calling it such when we use that in a loop, okay, in a block. And here again it's the file intermediate. Alright, now let's go ahead and put the first step. Remember, the first step of every CCBPM is a receive step. So the BPM will get triggered when I receive my file, right? So I'm dragging my receive step, putting it between the start and the stop step. Okay, and I'm saying receive file request and I'm going to select the message. And what is the message going to be? File request. All right, that is done. Now that the file request is created, the next step is the file request has to be split into multiple messages, right? So now go here, select the transform step, because you're going to split the input file into multiple messages. So go here, make sure you're in the transform step, which is the fourth button, and drag it and put it after your receive step between your stop step. All right. So here you say, call the transform split file into multi-intermediate. All right, and select your operation mapping. Let's say perfect. You see the operation mapping is now come in. Now it's asking me, hey, what is my source message, right? So the moment it's you see that, it's asking you for a source message. Oops. All right. It's asking me for a source message. So let's use the selection help. The source message is the file request message, right? And the target message is a multi-line element. That is the file of multi-line element. Perfect. All right. This is also done. Somehow the current element is gone. So I'm going to, the container element that we created called current is missing. So I'm going to create select cur abstract interface SIOA and call it, yeah, apply, save. Okay, perfect. Now I'm going to do a restore view. I'm trying to figure out. Okay, I zoomed out. All right. Okay. Now we are going. Now we've added a receive step, a transform step. Now we have multiple split messages. We now need to do a for step, right? A block step that is going to repeat. So now if you see, you need to look for a block step, and a block step is available here. This is a block step. Drag the block step and put it here. Remember, the block step is equivalent to a for loop. So call that block step as block, change it to block for each file. In the mode you say, don't say default, default will just execute it once, you say for each. The difference between par for each and for each is par for each will execute the split in parallel. This is parallel for each and this is one after the sequential for each. So let's go par for each. It's asking me what is the current line element or multi-line element. If you see, it's asking me what is the multi-line element and what is the current line element. Like for a for element, my multi-line element is this, and my current line element has to be my current line. Why do I not see anything in the current line? I will tell you why. My current lines, there is this concept of scope. Just as for every variable, you need a scope. If I see this is a file intermediate current, sorry, this is the file intermediate current line, and for that the scope is defined as process. Instead, change it to block. Okay, go to your current line element and change the scope from process to block, because this is a local variable whose scope is restricted only to your block. Now once you do that, if you select here, you should be able to see your file intermediate current. Perfect. So for each of them, it's going to do that. Now within this block, we are going to do a send synchronous step, where we are going to say, oops, again. Yeah, now it's perfect. I'm going to say send sync call to RFC, make it a synchronous, mode as synchronous, and select our synchronous interface, right? BAPI user. SIAS BAPI is our within the multi mapping. Select that. It's asking my request structure. My request structure is my current line element. My response structure is going to be again my file response element, and then I have my file response. I have to now put another send step within my block after my send synchronous. Again, I didn't drag it correctly. Perfect. Now I'm going to call it send BAPI response, send file response, sorry. And now select the message. It's going to be file response message, and then save it. And with that, your CCBPM is done, right? In the block mode, what we've told, execute it in a for mode, is in a for loop mode, and the multi-line element is multi-line and the current line element is current line, and make sure that the current line element scope is defined as block for each. With that, our CCBPM development is done. Let's go ahead and activate our CCBPM. I'm activating my CCBPM. My CCBPM is activated. With this, our CCBPM development is done, and I shall see you in the next session where we will be configuring the scenario in the integration directory. So I shall